Classroom history can excite and inspire, or it can feel like a boring sequence of names, dates, and places. Well, either way, history at school focuses on the bigger picture, the major events that shaped our world and the people behind them. If you are lucky, you might catch a glimpse of the lives of ordinary people. Still, for the most part, the obscure, absurd, or just plain unusual facts and events from history are kept hidden. So to redress the balance and to show that life in the past was just as odd as today, here are 15 historical facts they forgot to teach you in school. Number 15. Rabbits attacked Napoleon. Let's start off with something unbelievable. If you are familiar with my Brief Moment of History series, then you may have read about the time the Australian Army fought a war against emus and lost. But apparently, the French didn't fare much better against rabbits. In 1807, Napoleon, feeling victorious after subduing both Prussia and Russia, agreed to attend a celebratory rabbit hunt arranged by his chief of staff, Alexandre Berthier. The place was a private estate outside Paris. 1,000 rabbits had been boxed and prepared in advance. But when released, the rabbits had no intention of fleeing. Instead of scattering, they stormed the hunting party, focusing their attack on Napoleon. The belligerent bunnies bit the dictator's legs and back while the other hunters tried to drive them off. Finally, Napoleon was able to run for the safety of his carriage. While schools highlight his big victories, they rarely mention the day rabbits attacked Napoleon. Number 14. Albert Einstein as the president. This year marks 120 years since Einstein's miracle year in 1905, when he published a lot of his groundbreaking discoveries that revolutionized modern physics. But let's set special relativity aside for a second, because in 1952, Einstein was offered something wildly unexpected: the presidency of Israel. After the country's first president, Chaim Weizmann, Einstein's friend and admirer, fell into poor health, he personally asked Einstein to take his place. Weizmann had called him the greatest Jew alive, believing Einstein could guide the young nation with wisdom and moral clarity. Einstein was a known Zionist and hero of peaceful Jewish-Arab cooperation, so the offer made some sense politically. But he was also a naturalized American, deeply committed to science and wary of political roles. While he was deeply moved by the proposal and reassured that the position wouldn't interfere with his research, Einstein declined with grace and humility. The man who reshaped the universe wasn't interested in leading the Israeli nation. Number 13. Hitler's love for Disney. Well, this guy is best remembered for how bad and brutal he was. He was a dictator, an architect of genocide, and the man who dragged the whole world into war. But hidden behind that monstrous legacy was something completely unexpected. He was fascinated with Disney. While railing against Western culture in public, Hitler privately admired Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, even praising it as a masterpiece of animation. Well, just imagine that for a moment, the man behind the Holocaust watching cute woodland animals break into song. It's quite strange enough, but it gets worse. In his downtime, Hitler sketched Disney characters like Snow White and Pinocchio. These drawings, found years later, paint a surreal picture of a dictator with a bizarre love for cartoons. Well, of course, this doesn't redeem him in the slightest. Instead, it's a reminder of how someone capable of such evil could still indulge in something so innocent. History has its share of odd and otherworldly twists, and this one is deeply unsettling. Number 12. The Pope's War Against Cats. Religion has always shaped the world, but sometimes beliefs take strange turns. In 1227, Pope Gregory IX became head of the Catholic Church and launched an unexpected crusade against cats. Believing that felines, especially black ones, carried demonic energy, he declared them agents of the devil. With his authority, he urged people to exterminate cats, and his influence spread quickly. When the plague erupted during his reign, Gregory became even more convinced he was right, blaming the disease on the devil's anger at his holy campaign. Black cats were especially targeted, thought to be physical forms of Satan. Ironically, the real cause of the plague was fleas living on rats, which only worsened after the mass killing of cats. Without their natural predators, rat populations exploded, spreading the disease faster. Scientists later confirmed the link, but Gregory's decree had already caused lasting damage. What began as a religious conviction ended up fueling one of the deadliest pandemics in history, entirely by mistake. Number 11. The Opium Wars in China. The mid-19th century marked a very decisive turning point in modern Chinese history with the Opium Wars. The first conflict, which lasted from 1839 to 1842, pitted China against Great Britain. Soon after this war, the Second Opium War, from 1856 to 1860, saw a weakened China confronting both Britain and France, once again ending in defeat. The terms of surrender were harsh. China was forced to cede Hong Kong to British control, open treaty ports to foreign trade, and grant sweeping privileges to foreigners within them. To make the humiliation even worse, British opium sales surged across China, excused under the banner of free trade, while the human cost was ignored. There are different perspectives on Britain's motives. Some saw it as defending trade, others as a move to protect imperial reputation. For China, the First Opium War marked the decline of late imperial power, beginning the so-called Century of Humiliation. The wars taught a hard truth. Falling behind meant subjugation, fueling later absolute movements. Number 10. Turning a cat into a telephone. Well, we've talked about how Pope Gregory blamed cats for the plague, but this next cat probably would have preferred exorcism to what scientists had in mind. In 1929, Professor Ernest Glenn Weaver and his assistant Charles William Bray from Princeton University conducted a bizarre experiment to study how the auditory nerve processes sound. And yes, it involved turning a living cat into a makeshift telephone. The duo sedated the cat, exposed its auditory nerve, and attached a telephone wire directly to it. On the other end, a telephone receiver was connected. Bray spoke into the cat's ears, while Weaver, sitting in a soundproof room 50 feet away, was able to clearly hear him through the receiver. The experiment worked. It launched both men into successful scientific careers. As for the cat, while it did survive the first test, it sadly didn't make it through the follow-up experiments. Science wins, but the cat, not so much. Number 9. The Siege of Leningrad. This was a super brutal military blockade carried out by Axis forces against the Soviet city of Leningrad, now known as St. Petersburg, during World War II. It began on September 8, 1941, when German troops launched an offensive that quickly stalled. Despite their efforts, they couldn't break the city. For 872 days, German and Finnish troops cut off land access, leaving only a water route across Lake Ladoga as Leningrad's lifeline. Residents endured one of the deadliest famines in recorded history, shrinking the city's population by 1/3, dropping below 800,000. With freezing winters, food and fuel were scarce. People burned furniture and books for warmth, and as starvation worsened, reports of cannibalism surfaced. While initially blamed on horse and dog meat, over 2,000 registered cases of human cannibalism were cited, though the real number was likely much higher. The siege remains one of the longest and most devastating in human history, marked by staggering civilian loss and unimaginable suffering. Number 8. The macabre history of dentures. Well, today's dentures are polished and practical, but their history is far from it. As early as 700 BC, the Etruscans were crafting fake teeth using human and animal remains. It was not exactly hygienic, but inventive. By the 1700s, dentists began carving dentures from ivory, elephant, walrus, and hippo. It was stylish, but rarely comfortable. Then came the 1800s and the infamous Waterloo teeth. Real human teeth pulled from fallen soldiers after the Battle of Waterloo. Well, yes, people literally wore dead men's smiles. Porcelain dentures followed, but they were fragile and prone to cracking or shrinking. Finally, in the 20th century, acrylic resins changed everything. Durable, clean, and corpse-free, they became the gold standard. The evolution of dentures is part horror story, part medical triumph, a journey from battlefield scavenging to lab-crafted precision. While today's models are sleek and painless, the road there was grim and, frankly, a little disturbing, all in the name of just one thing: the perfect smile, no matter the cost. Number 7. The Antarctic and Ancient Greece. Most people learn about Antarctica in geography class, but hardly anyone knows how the coldest continent on Earth got its name. While Norwegian explorers first mapped large portions of Antarctica in the 19th century and gave many areas Norwegian names, the name of the continent itself has nothing to do with Norway. Instead, it comes straight from ancient Greece. The word Arctic derives from the Greek Arctos, which means bear. The Arctic was named for the constellations Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great Bear and the Little Bear, which are visible in the northern sky. So when it came time to name the icy land on the other side of the globe, the Greeks logically called it Antarcticos, meaning opposite the Arctic. In other words, the place opposite the land of the bears. It's one of those overlooked details hiding in plain sight. Geography, history, and mythology, all wrapped up in a single word we've heard since childhood. Number 6. Pharaoh Pepi II and his dislike for insects. The Egyptian Empire was one of the grandest in human history, ruled by pharaohs with absolute power, some of whom took that authority to absurd extremes. Pepi II, who was ruler of Egypt's 6th dynasty, came to power at just 6 years old after the death of his brother Meron-Re. He went on to rule for 94 years, the longest reign of any monarch in recorded history. Beyond his long rule, Pepi II is remembered for his bizarre habits. In one preserved letter, he ordered the governor of Aswan to bring back a dancing pygmy for his joy during expeditions in Nubia. But perhaps most famously, Pepi II despised flies. According to ancient accounts, he instructed his slaves to cover themselves in honey so flies would swarm them instead of him. While Pepi found flies unbearable, other Egyptians respected them. Fly amulets made of gold, silver, and gemstones were worn as symbols of persistence and bravery, especially among soldiers on the battlefield. Number 5. The Great Fire of London. The Great Fire of London erupted on September 2nd, 1666, in a small bakery on Pudding Lane. In just 3 days, it consumed nearly the entire city, destroying 89 churches, 13,500 houses, and leaving about 90% of London's 80,000 residents homeless. But somehow, official records listed only 6 deaths. Among the few named were an unidentified maid from the bakery and 3 individuals inside St. Paul's Cathedral, their bodies mummified by extreme heat. But no one really believes only 6 people died. At the time, London's administration was in disarray, and many deaths simply went uncounted. Some victims were likely incinerated in collapsed buildings, while others, especially the poor, were never reported missing. Ashes were cleared away, names were forgotten, and the full human cost vanished into smoke. The fire reshaped the city's layout and forced new fire safety laws. But what's most haunting is how few lives were officially acknowledged after one of the most devastating urban fires in European history. Number 4. Tsutomu Yamaguchi. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are remembered for ending World War II and for the unimaginable devastation they caused. But one man, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, lived through both blasts. On August 6, 1945, Yamaguchi, 29 years old, was in Hiroshima on business when the U.S. dropped the Little Boy bomb just 1.8 miles from his location. He suffered burns across his upper body but survived. After a night in a shelter, he returned home to Nagasaki. 2 days later, on August 9th, Nagasaki was bombed by the Fat Man. Once again, Yamaguchi was only 1.8 miles from the epicenter, and once again, he survived. While 73,000 people in Nagasaki were killed, Yamaguchi walked away with minor injuries. He became the only officially recognized survivor of both atomic bombings. His life became a symbol of resilience and a quiet, painful reminder of what it means to survive history's most catastrophic events, not once, but twice. Number 3. Kim Jong-il and his love for opera. When most people think of Kim Jong-il, opera isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind. But according to the official North Korean biography released after he died in 2011, the dictator was not only a political figure, but also a masterful composer. He wrote 6 operas, it claimed, better than any in the history of music. While that's a bold statement by any standard, it reflects just how carefully his image was curated by the regime. Kim Jong-il inherited his love for opera from his dad, Kim Il-sung, and in 1974 he published The Art of Opera, a book outlining his vision for performance. He believed operas should reflect national pride and glorify the collective spirit, especially that of North Korea. Of course, whether he actually composed anything is up for debate, but in North Korea, questioning the official narrative wasn't exactly encouraged. His operatic legacy might not have impressed the West, but it fit his carefully controlled mythos perfectly. Number 2. Genghis Khan, the conqueror and climate changer. This guy doesn't need any intro. He was one of the most brutal, feared, and strangely respected figures in history. Under his command, The Mongol Empire exploded into the largest land empire ever recorded, from the Pacific Ocean all the way to Eastern Europe. But the price was huge. Over 40 million people died during his conquests. Entire cities erased. Fields went silent, and yet here's where it gets bizarre. Now, scientists believe Genghis Khan unintentionally helped the environment. So much farmland was abandoned and so many people were wiped out that forests regrew across Asia, pulling around 700 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere. That's right. One of the deadliest men in history might have cooled the planet a little. Of course, no amount of climate relief balances out the horror, but it's a strange legacy. Mass destruction paired with accidental reforestation. He reshaped the world, no doubt, just not in the way you'd expect. Number 1. Thomas Edison's terrifying talking doll. Edison is remembered for his great inventions like light bulbs, phonographs, and even helping introduce the word hello to phone conversations. But not everything he touched turned to gold. One of his most unusual and creepiest projects was the Edison phonograph doll. Developed in the late 1880s, this 22-inch doll was built to recite children's rhymes using a tiny phonograph hidden in its chest. Kids could crank a handle on the back and the doll would sing. But instead of being charming, the result was nightmare fuel. The voice recordings were harsh, eerie, and garbled, more creepy than delightful. The wax records inside would warp, crack, or disintegrate quickly, and the cranking mechanism was awkward for small hands. Though mass production began in 1890, the dolls flopped within 6 weeks. Parents were unimpressed, children were terrified, and sales flatlined. Today, Edison's talking doll is remembered less as a toy and more as a disturbing footnote in the history of innovation gone very wrong. With this, that's it for today. What do you think about these historical facts? Do you have any others? Well, let us know. And as we always say, if you find this video interesting, please like and subscribe. We'll catch you soon.